It was my house, inherited and mine, and her audacity still stings. My mother-in-law, Patty, tried to steal it. I had a feeling something was coming, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I'm 35, and after years in my field, I've learned that letting people underestimate you can be a powerful tool. It's not like I go around announcing my profession. People either want free advice or treat you like some kind of stereotype. My husband, Stacy, and we're a team. 6 years married, and I feel like he gets me, especially when it comes to his mother. Patty. Intense doesn't even begin to describe her. She's one of those women who firmly believes she's always right, that her way is the only way, and she needs to control everything. Even before Stacy and I got together, I could tell Patty was always the center of attention. I think from the moment she met me, I became her nemesis. Stacy grew up in a close family, but she controlled them. I wasn't what she imagined for her daughter. I wasn't some doctor or CEO. I came from a normal background, worked my tail off to get where I am now. Patty didn't care about that. To her, I was just taking Stacy away from her. In the beginning, I attempted to keep the peace. Stacy adored her mother, so I told myself I could deal with it. But Patty made it nearly impossible. It was always these subtle, pointed remarks disguised as innocent conversation. Family dinners were minefields. "Oh, you're in law? My friend's son is at Harvard." Or, "It's good you're so driven." Stacy's old boyfriend never had to work. At least Stacy always defended me. But Patty? Instant victim. I was just talking, she'd say, all wounded innocence. Then my uncle died and left me the beach house. It's small, 2 bedrooms, definitely a fixer-upper, but it's been in my family forever. The paint's peeling, there's a leaky roof, and the plumbing is vintage. It's perfect. Stacy and I saw it as a weekend project, a place to escape. Patty's reaction was immediate. At first, it was the usual digs. "A beach house? Are you sure you can handle that at your age? Can you even afford the upkeep?" Dismissible, but irritating. Then she started just happening to be in the area. We live an hour away from her, and the beach house is even further. Her excuses were ludicrous. Then, one day, our neighbor Frank, who's retired and always watching what happens, called to tell me about a woman with big hair snooping around. Patty is known for hair that defies gravity, so I knew it was her. When I called her out on it, she acted like she was there just to check that everything was okay. That's when things started to get weird. I'd noticed things out of place at the house. A chair moved, a window unlocked that I swear I'd locked myself. Stacy thought I was imagining it, but I knew something was going on. Then one day, I found a folder on the kitchen table. Property documents. At first, I thought it was a joke. Then I saw Patty's handwriting on the margins. I first noticed it when I saw the notes she'd scribbled, things like family legacy and secure ownership. A chill went down my spine. It suddenly dawned on me that Patty wasn't just being her usual intrusive self. She was scheming something with the house. I decided to play it cool, to hold my tongue for a bit and just see what I could uncover. Years of law have taught me the value of gathering all the intel before a confrontation. Besides, I was curious to see just how far she'd go. So I set up a couple of cameras discreetly placed around the main living areas. Nothing creepy, just a precaution. Within a week, I had my proof. Patty was letting herself in with a spare key, one she'd clearly copied without our knowing. When I showed Stacy the footage, she was furious. She confronted Patty, who initially denied everything, then lamely tried to excuse it by claiming she was just trying to help. Stacy told her, in no uncertain terms, to stay away. For a while, things quieted down. But a nagging feeling persisted. I should have known Patty wouldn't let it go that easily. About 6 months later, the situation exploded. It was a sunny Saturday morning at the beach house. I was mid-bagel, savoring the peace, when Stacy called me from the porch, her voice tight with barely contained anger. I stepped outside, and there they were, Patty, squeezed into one of her signature blazers and sporting that gravity-defying hair, and a man she proudly introduced as my lawyer. This lawyer looked like he'd just finished Googling business casual 5 minutes before leaving his house. He clutched a briefcase that probably predated me and had this jittery air about him, like he was deeply regretting his life choices. "Good morning," Patty chirped, as if barging onto private property was perfectly normal. "We need to talk about some important family matters." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" "Yes," she said, brushing past me as if she owned the place. "It's about the future of this house. And, by the way, you're welcome for me coming all this way to help you sort it out." Honestly, despite my annoyance, a part of me was intrigued. Patty's always been a drama queen, but this level of audacity was new even for her. I decided to let her hang herself. Stacy, meanwhile, was giving her mom a look that could curdle milk. Patty waved her hand toward the kitchen table and promptly sat down, snapping her fingers at the guy in the ill-fitting suit. Todd, let's get started. Todd, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, fumbled with his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. I glanced at Stacy, who silently mouthed, "What the hell?" I just shrugged. This was Patty's circus, and I was content to watch the show. This, Patty announced, tapping the top sheet with a perfectly manicured fingernail, is a transfer of ownership agreement. It's very simple. You and Stacy will sign the house over to me, and I'll ensure it remains within the family for generations to come. I stared at her, trying not to burst out laughing. You want us to sign the house over to you? Yes, she said, as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. It's for the best. You're young, inexperienced, and frankly, this kind of property is a lot of responsibility. It needs someone who understands its value. Barely suppressing a grin, I said, and that someone is you? Exactly, she exclaimed, preening. It's not personal, dear. It's just what's best for the family. Todd, who'd been shuffling papers like a magician prepping for a disastrous act, finally chimed in. If you'll just take a look here, he mumbled, sliding a paper toward me. I picked it up and gave it a quick scan. It was a joke, a legal travesty. The wording was sloppy, half the clauses were missing, and there were typos everywhere. This lawyer screamed fraud, from his nervous perspiration to his inability to meet my gaze. Time for a little fun. I decided to pepper him with some basic legal questions, the kind any first-year law student could handle. I watched him squirm and stammer while Patty kept trying to interrupt. Patty, I said, setting the paper down, did you write this yourself? Her face flushed crimson. Of course not. Todd is a professional, right? I said, turning to Todd. So, Todd, which law school did you attend? I inquired. He blinked, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Oh, well, I didn't actually, finish. I didn't bother letting him elaborate. Okay, no problem. And your bar number? Todd started to sweat, beads forming on his forehead. I'm not officially licensed. Not officially licensed, I echoed, letting the incredulity seep into my voice. So, you're not a lawyer? He stammered something about being in the process, but I cut him off again. Got it. Thanks, Todd. I watched Patty bristle, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack as her plan threatened to disintegrate. Let's not get distracted by technicalities, Patty insisted, clearly agitated. The important thing is that we move forward with the transfer. Are you serious right now? Stacy said, her voice sharp. You brought a fake lawyer to our house and expect us to just hand it over to you? It's not fake, Patty snapped, her composure fraying. Todd is perfectly capable of handling this. Sure, I said, leaning back in my chair, a calculated casualness masking my amusement. But just for fun, let's see how capable he is. I turned to Todd, pinning him with a direct stare. Can you explain to me the difference between a quitclaim deed and a warranty deed? He froze, his eyes wide and panicked, like a deer caught in headlights. Patty started to interject, but I raised a hand, silencing her. No, let Todd answer. Todd mumbled something about legal terms and specific clauses, his words a meaningless jumble that conveyed absolutely nothing of substance. I nodded slowly, feigning an impress. Great, I said. Now, how about you explain the implications of signing a deed transfer without title insurance? He looked as if he might faint at any moment, his face paling visibly. Patty was practically vibrating with suppressed rage. This is ridiculous, she exploded. Just sign the papers and we can sort out the details later. I stood up, a sense of quiet power filling me. Walking over to my briefcase, I retrieved my own folder, placing it deliberately on the table. As a practicing attorney, I announced, emphasizing the weight of the words, I have a few concerns about these documents. Patty's jaw dropped, her carefully constructed mask of calm finally shattering. You're a lawyer? Yep, I confirmed, popping the P for emphasis, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips. And these documents? They're garbage. I proceeded to dissect each page, pointing out every error, every omission, every blatant misrepresentation, and explaining in excruciating detail why they were not only invalid but also bordering on fraudulent. By the time I was finished, Todd was visibly shaking, and Patty was shooting daggers at me. You've made your point, she hissed through gritted teeth. Oh, I'm not done, I countered, pulling out my laptop. You've been poking around the property records, haven't you? Did you really think I wouldn't notice the unauthorized inquiries? Patty's face went completely white. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, her voice unconvincing even to her own ears. Sure you don't, I said, opening an email on my screen and turning it for her to see. This is from the county clerk. It shows that someone made multiple inquiries into the title history of this property using your email address. Care to explain? Patty stood up abruptly, knocking her chair over in her haste, the screech of metal on wood echoing in the sudden silence. "I was just looking out for the family," she exclaimed. "By trying to steal our house?" Stacy shot back. "This is insane, Mom. You need to leave." Patty glared at us, her eyes filled with resentment, then turned to Todd. "We're leaving." Todd didn't need to be told twice. He practically sprinted out the door, his briefcase clutched tightly in his hand. Patty followed, but not before throwing one last venomous line over her shoulder. "You'll regret this." Once they were gone, Stacy and I just sat there in stunned silence for a moment, the weight of the confrontation hanging heavy in the air. "Well," Stacy said finally, breaking the silence, "that was something." And that's how Patty's first grand scheme completely imploded. Little did I know that this was just the opening act in a much longer, far more elaborate drama. Patty's grand plan to snatch the house from under us may have crumbled, but it just sent her into overdrive, launching a full-scale campaign of damage control. And when I say damage control, I mean she was working the phones, dialing up family members like she was running for political office. Apparently, in Patty's revised version of reality, I was the villain, an evil, controlling woman who was tearing the family apart, brainwashing Stacy, and ruthlessly isolating her from her loving mother. In her narrative, I was practically twirling a metaphorical villainous mustache while plotting to dismantle everything she held sacred. Now, Stacy's family is pretty close-knit, but they're far from naive. Okay, here's the most of them are aware of Patty's dramatic tendencies and her habit of twisting the truth. She's practically a yoga master with it. Even so, a few relatives rang me up, just curious about the real story. After I explained everything, most people just laughed it off and told me not to worry so much. Apparently, Patty had been pulling stunts like this for years, maybe not quite on this scale, though. Her reputation for creative truth-telling, as one cousin delicately put it, had already made a lot of the family pretty skeptical of her. But it wasn't easy for everyone to dismiss it. A couple of her most devoted fans, like her sister Beverly, Patty's carbon copy, basically, weren't so quick to believe me. Beverly called Stacy, and let me tell you, eavesdropping on that was a real treat. "Stacy, I just don't understand why you're letting your husband come between you and your mother," Beverly said in that holier-than-thou tone that seems to be a family heirloom. "My husband isn't the problem, Beverly," Stacy snapped back. "Mom is the one who tried to steal our house." "Well, that's not what she told me," Beverly said, like she was some kind of detective who had cracked a huge case. "Of course, it's not," Stacy replied, "because if she told you the truth, you'd see how ridiculous she's being." Beverly tried to argue, but Stacy shut her down fast. "Look, you can believe whatever you want, but I was there. I saw what she did." End of discussion. Stacy hung up, and I swear I could practically see steam coming out of her ears. "I don't even know why I bother with her," she muttered, shaking her head. Meanwhile, Patty wasn't just working the phones, she was working herself into a full-blown frenzy. She started showing up at family events, radiating this weird martyr vibe, dropping little bombs about how she wasn't sure she'd ever see her daughter again, or how some people just don't appreciate family anymore. It was peak passive-aggressive Patty, and honestly, it was almost impressive how far she could take it. But things took a bizarre turn when Patty's antics spilled over into her work life. Apparently, she'd been using company resources to dig up information about the beach house. She must have thought no one would notice, but naturally, someone did. One day, Stacy got a call from one of her cousins who works in HR at Patty's company. "Small world, right? Did you hear about Patty?" the cousin asked, sounding a little awkward. "What about her?" Stacy replied, bracing herself. "She got fired. Apparently, she was using her work email to look up property records and send messages about, something shady." Stacy put the phone on speaker so I could hear everything, and we both just stared at each other in utter disbelief. Patty got herself fired trying to dig up dirt on us. It didn't take long for the rest of the family to find out, and let's just say Patty's reputation took another major nosedive. A few people who had been sitting on the fence finally called us to apologize for doubting our side of the story. "I can't believe she went that far," one of Stacy's cousins said. "She always seemed pushy, but this is next level." "Yeah," I said, "welcome to the club." With her job gone and her family starting to give her the cold shoulder, Patty's social calendar started looking pretty bare. But if you think that slowed her down, you clearly don't know Patty. About a week after she got fired, we started getting strange messages from mutual friends and acquaintances. Stuff like, "Patty says she's really worried about you guys," or "Patty mentioned you might be struggling financially. Do you need any help?" It didn't take a genius to figure out what she was up to. She was trying to plant the idea that Stacy and I couldn't handle the beach house. I guess in her twisted mind, if enough people believed we were incapable, she'd swoop in as the hero to save the day, probably expecting a medal or something. I actually considered confronting her, but Stacy convinced me to just let it go. She's digging her own grave, Stacy said, rolling her eyes. Let her keep talking. It just makes her look worse. And she was right. The more Patty talked, the more people started to see through her facade. Even her diehard supporters like Beverly were starting to get tired of all the drama. But just when we thought things were finally starting to calm down, Patty pulled her most audacious move yet. About a month later, we got a notice in the mail. It was from a lawyer, an actual licensed lawyer this time, informing us that Patty was suing us. When I opened that letter and read the details, I genuinely couldn't believe what I was seeing. Patty was claiming that she had financially contributed to the repairs and upkeep of the beach house and therefore had a valid claim to ownership. The fact that Uncle Leo's will had explicitly bequeathed the house to Stacy and me was almost laughable in this situation. I stared blankly for a moment before a bark of laughter escaped. She's actually suing us? I asked Stacy, waving the certified letter. Stacy snatched it from me. What's she claiming? That she's entitled to part of the house, I said, still amused, because of, the phantom financial contributions she supposedly made. Just like that, our peaceful life was disrupted again. After receiving the notice, I went into full research mode, compiling all the relevant documentation, bank statements proving our mortgage payments, receipts for every repair, every contractor's invoice, even emails about estate matters. I wouldn't allow her to obscure the truth with vague, manipulative statements. Stacy was justifiably furious. She didn't contribute a dime. How does she imagine she can prove anything? She's hoping we can't definitively disprove her assertions, I said, but we can and we will. Her entire case is built on deception and illusion. What's our next step? Stacy asked. We appear in court and allow her to expose herself, I replied. When the day in court finally arrived, we entered the courtroom prepared for anything. Of course, Patty was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table with her attorney. Unlike her previous con artist lawyer Todd, this one at least appeared competent, though he seemed somewhat unenthusiastic about the case. Patty, however, was in her element. She was dressed in her flamboyant style and had that smug look that I knew so well. We sat down and the judge entered, an older woman who radiated authority. She wasted no time asking Patty's lawyer to present his case. Patty's lawyer rose and delivered what was clearly a rehearsed opening statement. He began by praising Patty's character, portraying her as a caring mother seeking only to preserve her family legacy. Then he went on to the claims, asserting that Patty had personally invested considerable sums of money into the beach house's repairs and upkeep to keep it in good shape. Receipts, seriously? I whispered to Stacy, raising an eyebrow. She has audacity anyway, Stacy muttered. Patty's lawyer continued, asserting that while the house was inherited, Patty's alleged contributions created an implied interest in the property. She acted in good faith to safeguard the family's assets, he declared. When it was my turn, I decided to be brief and direct. Your Honor, the plaintiff's claims are completely baseless. My wife and I inherited the house from my uncle under his will. It is our sole property and there has never been an agreement, whether written or spoken, for shared ownership. The plaintiff has no proof to back up her assertions since they are simply untrue. The judge nodded and gestured for Patty to take the stand. Patty walked up as if about to give the performance of a lifetime. Mrs. Patty, her lawyer began, could you explain your involvement with the beach house's repairs and upkeep? Of course, she said, clasping her hands. When I learned about the house being left to my daughter and her wife, I was happy for them. However, the house needed significant work and they were overwhelmed, so I decided to help. And in what way did you help? The lawyer asked. I paid for several repairs, Patty said confidently, plumbing, roof work, some landscaping. I didn't keep track of all the details because, well, they're family. I only wanted to ensure the house was habitable. I watched her expressionlessly, but internally I was rolling my eyes. Patty's ability to distort reality was truly something. Her lawyer continued. So, you made financial contributions to the house's maintenance? Yes, she said. I even offered to supervise some of the tasks. Did the defendants acknowledge these contributions? It was tacitly accepted, she said, relying on her preferred vague response. When it was my turn to cross-examine, I approached the stand with my file of documents. Mrs. Patty, I began, you assert that you contributed financially to the beach house's repairs. Could you state the dates and amounts of these payments? She paused. Well, I didn't keep detailed records, but it was several $1,000s over several months. Several $1,000s, I repeated. And how are these payments made? Check? Direct cash to contractors? Mostly cash, she said, shifting in her seat. Cash, I stated, letting the word resonate in the sterile courtroom air. And you possess absolutely no receipts, invoices, or even a simple bank statement to validate these so-called contributions? I watched her, a mixture of anticipation and weariness swirling within me. She hesitated, a slight flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. It was informal, she finally offered. Family doesn't always keep meticulous records of these things, you know? Interesting, I murmured, turning towards the judge, the weight of the file in my hands a tangible reassurance. Because I have here a complete and exhaustive record of every single payment made towards the repair and ongoing maintenance of the beach house. Each and every transaction originated from our joint account, and I possess the corresponding receipts and invoices from the various contractors as undeniable proof. I presented the documents to the judge, the crisp paper rustling softly as she began to examine them. Mrs. Patty, I continued, my voice steady and even, masking the simmering frustration beneath. You also mentioned, under oath, your offer to personally oversee aspects of the renovation. Could you perhaps elaborate on which specific contractors you directly collaborated with? Again, she paused, and I could almost see the frantic calculations whirring behind her eyes as she desperately searched for a plausible response. It wasn't a formal arrangement, she stammered, her voice losing some of its earlier conviction. How very convenient, I retorted, the sarcasm barely veiled. Because, according to these email exchanges with the contractors, meticulously documented and dated, every single communication and decision regarding the repairs was handled exclusively by either myself or my wife. Your name, I regret to inform you, doesn't appear anywhere within these records. The judge looked up from the pile of documents, her expression unreadable, a professional mask that revealed nothing. Mrs. Patty, she inquired, her tone neutral, do you have any credible evidence to support your claims of financial contribution to this property? Patty stammered, visibly flustered. I already told you, she insisted, her voice rising slightly in pitch. I didn't keep any records. I wasn't anticipating that I would need them for anything like this. I moved back to our table, the familiar weight of the final exhibit a comforting presence. Your Honor, I stated, my voice clear and resolute, I would also like to submit for your consideration a copy of the will pertaining to the beach house. As you will clearly see, the document unambiguously states that the property was bequeathed solely to my wife and myself. There is absolutely no mention of shared ownership, nor are there any stipulations regarding financial obligations on our part towards any other party. The judge accepted the document, briefly scanning its contents before turning her gaze back towards Patty. Mrs. Patty, she said, her tone now firm and devoid of sympathy, this entire case hinges on your assertion that you made substantial financial contributions to the upkeep of this property. However, you have failed to provide even a shred of concrete evidence to substantiate this claim. Meanwhile, the defendants have presented comprehensive documentation that directly contradicts your allegations. Do you have anything further to add at this time? She had nothing. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine understanding in her eyes, a dawning realization of the precariousness of her position. The judge dismissed the case swiftly thereafter, ruling decisively in our favor. But before the gavel fell, she added a pointed observation. Mrs. Patty, I strongly urge you to carefully consider the implications before initiating any further legal action without adequate supporting evidence. The resources of this court are not intended to be used for frivolous and baseless disputes. As Stacy and I exited the courtroom, a complex mixture of relief and vindication washed over me. Patty had tried her utmost to undermine us, to snatch what wasn't rightfully hers, but ultimately the truth had prevailed. Of course, knowing Patty as I did, I harbored no illusions that this legal defeat would mark the end of her interference in our lives. And I was right. One would think that after such a decisive and public loss in court, she might take a moment for introspection, perhaps even reconsider the trajectory of her life. But no, Patty, true to form, doubled down, resorting to the only tactic she truly seemed to master, distorting reality to paint herself as the victim. The first ripples of the fallout arrived almost immediately. Patty's failed lawsuit instantly became the family's new favorite topic of conversation. News spread like wildfire, and within days, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from various relatives. Most of them were simply eager for the salacious details, but a few expressed genuine shock and disbelief at the lengths Patty had gone to. One call stood out from Stacy's cousin, Brenda, a woman known for her brutally honest assessments of any situation. She actually thought she was going to win, didn't she? Brenda said, her voice laced with incredulous laughter. I mean, I always knew Aunt Patty was bold, but this is just beyond the pale. Honestly, I don't even know why she thought anyone would possibly believe her. She's been pulling this kind of crap for years. That sentiment became a recurring theme in the ensuing days. People began sharing anecdotes about past instances where Patty had manipulated situations, fabricated narratives, or generally inserted herself into matters where she had no rightful place. It was as if her courtroom defeat had finally released the dam and everyone was finally ready to voice their long-held grievances. Apparently, years ago, she had attempted to seize control of her sister's finances by claiming her sister was far too stressed to manage her own money. On another occasion, she had convinced a cousin to relinquish a valuable family heirloom under the pretense that it would be safer in her care, and unsurprisingly, the heirloom vanished without a trace shortly thereafter. Stacy and I largely refrained from participating in the family gossip, but it was difficult not to feel a sense of vindication. Patty's carefully constructed image as the benevolent family matriarch was rapidly crumbling, and it wasn't due to any actions on our part. She had single-handedly dug this hole for herself. But while the rest of the family seemed to be turning against her, Patty had no intention of relinquishing her grudge against us. She started bombarding Stacy with these lengthy, guilt-laden text messages, lamenting how the court case had deeply wounded her and how she couldn't fathom that her own daughter would betray her in such a cruel and unforgivable manner. "She's acting as if we dragged her kicking and screaming to court," Stacy said, rolling her eyes dramatically as she read the latest message. "Typical Patty," I sighed. "She's not truly sorry for what she did. She's just angry that she got caught. I think she just regrets that her plan failed," I thought, watching Stacy's frustration mount. I understood. I might have blocked Patty's number myself, but Stacy did it first. Predictably, this only made things worse. Then came the social media posts, vague, woe-is-me updates about being abandoned. Honestly, I even made a dark joke once, telling Stacy I give it 2 days before she's on Facebook Live, sobbing in front of those awful ceramic angels. It felt a little funny at the time, a way to cope. But then Patty moved on to actively seeking allies. I know she started calling everyone she knew, constructing this elaborate narrative about Stacy and me having turned against her when all she wanted was to keep the family together. I'm sure she embellished every detail. One of her first calls was to her sister, Beverly, who had always been Patty's steadfast champion. But even Beverly seemed to have finally reached her limit. "She called me bawling," Beverly told Stacy later. "But I honestly didn't know what to say. Stacy, you're my niece, and what Patty did was wrong. I just can't defend her this time." Hearing that from Beverly, I knew that was a turning point. If Patty was losing Beverly, she was losing a major pillar of her support system. Despite the growing negative reaction, Patty refused to back down quietly. I learned that she tried to go straight to the head of the family, Stacy's grandma, who always remained neutral during family conflicts. Patty drove out to see her uninvited, as per usual, and spent hours crying and portraying herself as the victim. But Grandma, to her credit, didn't fall for it. According to Stacy's cousin, Brenda, who heard about the visit later, Grandma told Patty in no uncertain terms that she needed to cease the drama and accept responsibility for her own actions. "She actually said that?" Stacy asked, shocked, when Brenda recounted the conversation. "Yep. Apparently, Grandma told her, 'I love you, but this is your mess and you need to clean it up.'" Patty left in a huff, naturally, but the damage was done. She'd effectively alienated almost everyone, and I doubted any amount of tears could fix it. Meanwhile, Stacy and I felt lighter, freer. The beach house was finally ours without the looming threat of a lawsuit. Patty had gone relatively silent, at least for the moment. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a matter of time before she stirred up trouble again. Stacy and I spent hours discussing what our future relationship with Patty would look like. Personally, I was ready to sever all ties completely. After everything she had put us through, I saw no possible path forward. Stacy, however, wasn't quite there yet. "She's still my mom," she told me one evening as we sat on the porch. "I know she's toxic and I know she's done terrible things, but it's hard to let go completely. What if she really does change?" I didn't want to pressure her, but I also knew that clinging to hope with someone like Patty could be incredibly risky. "I understand," I said carefully. "But you've seen what she's capable of. This isn't just a harmless habit or some quirky personality trait. She's intentionally tried to hurt us. That's not something you can easily forgive or forget." Stacy sighed, looking conflicted. "I know. I don't know if I'm ready to walk away completely." So we reached a compromise. Stacy maintained minimal contact with Patty, an occasional text or a quick phone call, but we established firm boundaries: no unannounced visits, no discussions about the house, and absolutely no manipulation tactics. For a while, it seemed to work. Patty remained relatively quiet, only reaching out to Stacy with surface-level conversations. I could see how difficult it was for Stacy to maintain her distance, but she remained strong and I admired her for it. Then Patty did what she excels at, she crossed the line. It started innocently enough. Stacy received a call from a cousin who mentioned that Patty had been talking about the beach house again. She said something about how it should have stayed in the family the cousin had mentioned. I didn't think much of it, but I figured you'd want to know. Stacy tried to dismiss it as just Patty venting, but I noticed the worry creeping into her expression. What if she's planning something? She asked me, her voice laced with concern. She wouldn't be that foolish, I reassured her, not after what happened in court. She knows she can't win. But I clearly underestimated just how far Patty was willing to go and how blinded she was by her own anger. One weekend, Stacy and I drove out to the beach house, eager to spend a relaxing couple of days away from the city. As we pulled into the driveway, I immediately felt a sense of unease, like something was wrong. The front door was slightly ajar, and I noticed a box sitting on the porch, which immediately set off alarm bells. What the hell? I heard Stacy say as she got out of the car. A knot tightened in my stomach as we approached the front door. I reached out and pushed it open, and my heart seemed to drop straight into my shoes. Chaos. That's the only word for what I saw. The living room was a disaster, furniture askew, drawers pulled open, papers scattered haphazardly on the coffee table. My eyes landed on a note, Patty's distinctive scrawl unmistakable. It read, "I'm sorry, but I had to step in. This house is too important to let you ruin it. You'll understand someday." Stacy stood beside me, utterly still, her gaze locked on the note. "She was here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I moved forward, picking up the scattered papers. They were estimates. Repair estimates, renovation estimates, new flooring, updated appliances, landscaping plans. It was as if Patty had marched in and started orchestrating a complete overhaul without a word to either of us. "She broke in," I said, the anger bubbling up inside me, a burning sensation in my chest. "She let herself into our house and decided she was in charge." Stacy sank onto the couch, her face ashen. I can't believe this," she murmured. I grabbed my phone, navigating to the security camera app. There she was. Patty, clear as day, strutting into the house with a clipboard and a tape measure like she was auditioning for a home improvement show. Hours she spent inside, rifling through her belongings, scribbling notes, completely violating our space. I watched the footage, Stacy beside me, and with each passing second, her expression grew harder, colder. By the time the video ended, she was beyond furious, a quiet rage radiating from her. "She didn't just cross the line," Stacy finally said, her voice low and dangerous. "She obliterated it." I nodded, understanding washing over me. "This is who she is, Stacy. She's not going to change. She's always going to feel entitled to control your life." Stacy was silent for what felt like an eternity, lost in her own thoughts. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with a weary resolve. "You know what? I'm done. I can't do this anymore." That night, I listened as Stacy called Patty, confronting her. "I can't believe you would do this," she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "You broke into our house. You went through our things. How could you even think that's okay?" I heard Patty's voice, tinny through the phone's speaker, launching into her usual performance. "I was just trying to help," she whined. "You've been ignoring me, and I thought this would show you how much I care." "This isn't love, Mom," Stacy said, her voice unwavering. "This is control, and I'm done letting you. You manipulate me." I could hear Patty starting to cry on the other end of the line, but Stacy didn't falter. "I don't want to hear from you anymore," she said, her voice clear and strong, "not until you've actually changed, and I mean really changed. I'm blocking your number, and I don't want you coming near us or the house again." Patty tried to argue, to plead, but Stacy hung up, ending the call. Then she blocked her number and deleted her from all her social media accounts. It wasn't an easy decision for Stacy. I knew it tore her apart inside. But it was the right one. Patty had crossed so many lines, trampled so many boundaries, that there was simply no going back. In the days that followed, Stacy and I navigated a strange mix of relief and profound sadness. Cutting ties with Patty was never something Stacy had wanted to do, but it had become painfully clear that there was no other viable option. "This isn't just about us anymore," Stacy said one evening as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues. "It's about protecting our future, our peace. She doesn't get to take that from us." The beach house, once a stark reminder of Patty's constant interference, was slowly transforming into a sanctuary, a place where we could finally move forward, free from the weight of the past. And that freedom, more than anything, was worth every single battle we'd fought, every tear we'd shed. It was ours now.